December 25th, 1991. The Soviet flag comes down from the Kremlin for the last time. Mikhail Gorbachev signs his resignation. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics dies on paper. But deep in the frozen waters of the Kola Peninsula and the Pacific Fleet bases, 162 nuclear submarines sit abandoned like radioactive ghosts. Where do you put a nuclear reactor when your country no longer exists? How do you dismantle 200 tons of weapons-grade uranium when your military budget just vanished? What happens to the most dangerous machines ever built when no one is left to guard them? The Soviet nuclear fleet took 40 years to build. It carried enough firepower to end civilization. The Typhoon-class submarines alone measured 568 feet long and displaced 48,000 tons submerged. Each one carried 20 R-39 ballistic missiles with 10 nuclear warheads per missile. The reactors used highly enriched uranium at 90% purity. Weapons grade, the same material needed for atomic bombs. When the Soviet Union collapsed, these submarines became the world's most dangerous inheritance. No money to maintain them, no clear chain of command to secure them, no plan to dispose of the reactors safely. January 1992. Admiral Vladimir Chernovin stands before the Russian Navy's Northern Fleet headquarters in Severomorsk. Snow covers the Kola Peninsula. The temperature hits minus 30 degrees Celsius. Chernovin counts his fleet. 96 nuclear submarines sit in various states of decay. 63 are fully operational, 33 are laid up awaiting decommissioning. The rest are already hulks, but every single one still contains its nuclear reactor. Every single one represents a potential Chernobyl waiting to happen underwater. The first crisis hits within weeks. The nuclear submarine Komsomolets had sunk in April 1989 in the Norwegian Sea. Its reactor and 2 nuclear torpedoes sit on the ocean floor at 1,685 meters depth. Norwegian scientists detect plutonium leaks. The reactor compartment shows signs of corrosion. Seawater is eating through the hull. The weapons-grade material inside could contaminate the entire North Atlantic fishing grounds. But Russia has no money for deep-sea recovery operations. No technology to raise a nuclear submarine from that depth. The reactor stays on the ocean floor. March 1992. The Typhoon-class submarine Dmitry Donskoy arrives at the Severodvinsk shipyard for decommissioning. Workers begin the process of defueling the reactor. They discover the fuel rods are cracked. Radioactive coolant has leaked into the submarine's hull. The contamination is so severe that workers can only spend 15 minutes at a time near the reactor compartment. The entire submarine has become a floating nuclear waste site, but there's nowhere to store the fuel rods safely. The Soviet nuclear waste facilities were designed for land-based reactors, not submarine reactors. The radioactive material sits in temporary storage tanks that were never meant to last more than 6 months. The Americans noticed the problem first. Satellites detect unusual activity at Soviet submarine bases. Nuclear material moving without proper security protocols. Reactor compartments sitting unguarded in open shipyards. The Pentagon estimates that enough weapons-grade uranium to build dozens of atomic bombs is now essentially unaccounted for. Senator Sam Nunn and Senator Richard Lugar propose a solution. Use American taxpayer money to help Russia secure and dismantle its nuclear arsenal. The Nunn-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction Program allocates $400 million specifically for submarine decommissioning. The first installment arrives in Moscow in August 1992. But money alone cannot solve the technical problems. Each nuclear submarine contains between 30 and 40 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. The reactor core must be removed in one piece. The fuel assemblies must be carefully extracted to prevent a criticality accident. One mistake could trigger a nuclear chain reaction. Russian shipyard workers have never dismantled a nuclear submarine before. The Soviet Navy always assumed the submarines would be used until they sank or were destroyed in combat. There was no decommissioning plan. September 1992. The first test begins at the Nerpa shipyard on the Kola Peninsula. Workers attempt to defuel the nuclear submarine K-3. The submarine served in the Northern Fleet for 28 years. Its reactor has been shut down for 3 years, but remains highly radioactive. The fuel rods are stuck in their assemblies. Corrosion has welded them in place. Workers use hydraulic tools to break them free. Radioactive coolant sprays across the reactor compartment. 3 workers receive radiation doses above the annual safety limit within the first hour. The operation stops. Admiral Igor Kasatonov takes command of the decommissioning program in October 1992. He establishes strict protocols. No more than 2 workers in the reactor compartment at one time. Radiation monitoring every 5 minutes. All work stops if radiation levels exceed safe limits. The first successful defueling takes place on November 15th, 1992. The nuclear submarine K-11 surrenders its uranium fuel after 8 weeks of careful work. The reactor compartment is sealed with concrete and steel. But the submarine hull still contains hundreds of tons of contaminated metal. There is no facility capable of processing radioactive steel on this scale. The Pacific Fleet faces worse problems. Vladivostok Harbor contains 43 decommissioned nuclear submarines. The Chajma Bay facility stores reactor compartments in the open air. Local fishermen report dead fish floating in the bay. Radiation monitors detect contamination in the water supply. The city of Vladivostok sits 15 kilometers away. 800,000 people live downstream from the nuclear storage site. Greenpeace activists measure radiation levels 100 times higher than normal background radiation. But Russian officials deny any safety problems exist. December 1992. The nuclear submarine K-19 arrives at Severodvinsk for dismantlement. This submarine earned the nickname Hiroshima after a reactor accident in 1961 killed 8 crew members. The reactor compartment remains contaminated 31 years later. Workers wearing full radiation suits enter the reactor space. Geiger counters click constantly. The fuel rods show signs of severe degradation. Some have partially melted. The extraction process takes 4 months. Workers remove the fuel 1 rod at a time using remote-controlled tools. The contaminated fuel fills 12 transport containers. Each container weighs 8 tons and requires armed escort to the storage facility. The storage problem grows worse every month. Russia inherits Soviet nuclear waste facilities designed for a different era. The Mayak Production Association in Chelyabinsk was built to process weapons-grade plutonium for bombs, not submarine reactor fuel. The facility is already contaminated from decades of weapons production. Adding submarine fuel to the mix creates new safety challenges. The storage pools are overcrowded. Some fuel assemblies must wait months for processing. They sit underwater in temporary racks, never designed for long-term storage. If you value documented Cold War and nuclear history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Now back to the story. January 1993. The United States Navy sends a technical assistance team to Severomorsk. American nuclear engineers examine Russian decommissioning procedures for the first time. They find serious safety violations. Reactor fuel stored without proper neutron absorbers. Contaminated tools left unmonitored for weeks. Workers eating lunch in areas with elevated radiation levels. The American team recommends immediate changes to prevent accidents. Russian officials resist foreign interference in military nuclear operations. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected source. The nuclear icebreaker Lenin had been decommissioned in 1989 after 30 years of Arctic service. Its 3 nuclear reactors present similar challenges to submarine reactors. Russian engineers develop new techniques for cutting through radioactive steel. They create mobile decontamination units. They design transport containers that can safely move reactor compartments by rail. The Lenin project becomes the template for submarine decommissioning. In March 1993, workers begin dismantling the nuclear submarine K-8 at Severodvinsk. This submarine sank in the Bay of Biscay in April 1970 after an onboard fire. The Soviet Navy raised it from the ocean floor and towed it to Severodvinsk for repairs. The submarine sat abandoned for 23 years while bureaucrats argued over its fate. Now the reactor compartment shows extensive corrosion. Seawater has penetrated the fuel assemblies. The uranium fuel has partially dissolved into radioactive sludge. The sludge extraction becomes the most dangerous operation yet attempted. Workers pump the contaminated liquid into sealed containers. The process takes 6 weeks. Each container holds 50 liters of radioactive waste with the consistency of thick mud. The containers are loaded onto special railroad cars and shipped to Mayak for processing, but 3 containers develop leaks during transport. Radioactive sludge drips onto the railroad tracks near Arkhangelsk. The contaminated rail line must be excavated and replaced. May 1993. The first reactor compartment is successfully removed from a nuclear submarine. K-42 undergoes complete dismantlement at the Nerpa shipyard. The reactor compartment weighs 800 tons and measures 12 meters long. Cranes lift it from the submarine hull in one piece. The compartment is welded shut and filled with concrete. It becomes a solid radioactive block that will remain dangerous for 300 years. The compartment is loaded onto a barge and towed to the Seda Bay storage site on the Kola Peninsula. Seda Bay becomes the graveyard for reactor compartments. The site sits on a remote island in the Barents Sea. No permanent human habitation within 50 kilometers. The reactor compartments are arranged in rows like concrete tombstones. Each compartment has a number painted in yellow. K-42 becomes compartment number 1. By December 1993, 12 more compartments join it. The site has no permanent security guards, no radiation monitoring equipment, no maintenance facilities. The compartments simply sit on the frozen ground waiting for a permanent solution that may never come. The Americans provide additional funding in 1994. The Nunn-Lugar program expands to cover reactor compartment storage. Engineers design a new facility at Seda Bay with concrete pads and drainage systems. The facility can safely store 100 reactor compartments for 50 years. Construction begins in May 1994. But Russian environmental groups file legal challenges. They argue the facility violates international nuclear waste treaties. Construction stops in August 1994 while courts consider the case. The Kursk incident changes everything. August 12, 2000. The nuclear submarine Kursk explodes during naval exercises in the Barents Sea. All 118 crew members die. The submarine sinks in 108 meters of water with 2 nuclear reactors on board. International attention focuses on Russian nuclear safety procedures. The world discovers that dozens of decommissioned reactor compartments sit unguarded at Arctic storage sites. Environmental groups demand immediate action. September 2000. President Vladimir Putin approves a new submarine dismantlement program. The government allocates 2 billion rubles over 5 years. The program includes construction of proper storage facilities, improved safety protocols, and international oversight. American and Norwegian experts are invited to participate. The first joint Russian-American dismantlement begins in October 2000 at Severodvinsk, but the pace remains slow. Each submarine takes 18 months to completely dismantle. The fuel removal alone requires 6 months of careful work. By December 2000, only 46 nuclear submarines have been fully decommissioned. 116 submarines still await dismantlement. The reactors contain enough uranium to build dozens of nuclear weapons. The storage facilities are approaching capacity. New sites must be found. The Bolshoi Kamen facility opens in 2001 near Vladivostok. The site can process 12 submarines per year. Japanese funding helps build radiation monitoring systems and worker training programs. The first Pacific Fleet submarine enters dismantlement in March 2001. But local environmental groups protest. They point out that the facility sits near a major earthquake fault zone. A major earthquake could rupture storage tanks and release radioactive material into the Sea of Japan. 2002 brings unexpected progress. The highly enriched uranium from submarine reactors can be blended down into low-enriched uranium for civilian power plants. American companies agree to purchase the diluted uranium. The program generates revenue that helps fund continued dismantlement work. Russian officials estimate they can earn $2 billion by selling downgraded submarine fuel to American power companies. The first uranium shipment leaves Russia in June 2002. 70 kilograms of highly enriched uranium from submarine reactors travels by air to the United States. The uranium contains enough fissile material to fuel a civilian power plant for 6 months. It also represents enough weapons-grade material to build 3 atomic bombs. The shipment arrives at the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant in Ohio. American technicians blend it with natural uranium to reduce the enrichment level from 90% to 4%. The diluted uranium can power civilian reactors but cannot be used for weapons. The program accelerates after 2003. American and Norwegian funding reaches $800 million annually. New dismantlement facilities open at Nurpa and Zvezdochka shipyards. Mobile reactor compartment transport systems reduce shipping costs. Improved safety protocols eliminate worker radiation exposure incidents. By December 2003, 78 nuclear submarines have been completely decommissioned, but new problems emerge. The reactor compartments at Seda Bay show signs of deterioration. Ice and salt water have corroded the steel outer shells. Some compartments develop small cracks that leak radioactive material. The temporary storage site was never designed for long-term use. Engineers estimate the compartments will need replacement within 20 years. The cost of building permanent storage facilities exceeds $5 billion. 2004 marks a major milestone. The 100th nuclear submarine enters dismantlement at Severodvinsk in March. The submarine K-159 served in the Northern Fleet for 26 years. Its reactor contains 42 kilograms of weapons-grade uranium. The fuel removal takes 7 months due to corrosion damage, but the operation proceeds without radiation exposure incidents. The reactor compartment joins 99 others at the Seda Bay storage site. International cooperation expands in 2005. The Global Partnership Against the Spread of Weapons and Materials of Mass Destruction pledges $20 billion over 10 years for nuclear threat reduction programs. Half the money goes to Russian submarine dismantlement. New participants include Canada, Japan, the European Union, and Norway. Each country provides funding, technical expertise, or equipment. The Typhoon-class submarines present special challenges. These giants of the Cold War carry 20 ballistic missiles each. The missile compartments must be carefully dismantled to remove all traces of weapon systems. The Dmitry Donskoy enters final dismantlement in September 2005. Workers spend 8 months removing the missile launch tubes. Each tube weighs 12 tons and measures 14 meters long. The tubes are cut into sections and melted down for scrap metal, but the steel remains slightly radioactive from neutron activation during reactor operations. 2006 brings disappointing news. Budget cuts reduce funding for the dismantlement program. Rising steel prices make scrap metal sales less profitable. Some storage facilities postpone maintenance upgrades. Worker training programs are reduced. The pace of dismantlement slows from 12 submarines per year to 8 submarines per year. Environmental groups warn that delays increase the risk of accidents. The financial crisis of 2008 further slows progress. International funding decreases as donor countries face economic problems. Russian government spending on nuclear security drops by 30%. Several dismantlement projects are postponed indefinitely. By December 2008, 124 nuclear submarines have been decommissioned, but 43 submarines still await processing. Their reactors contain enough uranium to build 100 nuclear weapons. 2009 marks 20 years since the first Soviet nuclear submarine was scheduled for decommissioning. Progress has been steady but incomplete. The reactor compartment storage facilities are nearly full. Long-term storage solutions remain undecided. Some compartments have been stored temporarily for 15 years with no permanent disposal plan. Engineers estimate the storage crisis will reach critical levels by 2015 without major new investments. New technology offers hope in 2010. Plasma cutting tools can slice through reactor compartments more safely than traditional methods. Remote-controlled systems reduce worker radiation exposure. Improved transport containers allow reactor compartments to be moved by rail instead of barge. The new techniques reduce dismantlement time from 18 months to 12 months per submarine. The last Typhoon-class submarine begins dismantlement in November 2011. The Severstal served for 23 years in the Pacific Fleet. Its reactor compartment weighs 900 tons, larger than any previous dismantlement. Special cranes must be brought from Germany to lift the compartment from the submarine hull. The operation takes place at the Zvezda shipyard near Vladivostok. The reactor compartment becomes the largest single piece of nuclear waste ever created by the dismantlement program. 2012 brings a milestone. The 150th nuclear submarine completes dismantlement at Severodvinsk in July. Only 17 submarines remain to be processed, but the storage crisis intensifies. The Seda Bay facility holds 94 reactor compartments on a site designed for 40. Some compartments must be stacked too high to save space. Engineers warn that overcrowding increases the risk of accidents. The final submarine enters dismantlement in April 2014. K-192 served in the Northern Fleet for 31 years. Its reactor shows extensive corrosion from decades of operation. The fuel removal takes 11 months, the longest of any submarine in the program. Workers extract 38 kilograms of weapons-grade uranium in deteriorated condition. Some fuel rods have partially melted from overheating during service. The damaged fuel requires special handling procedures to prevent criticality accidents. December 15th, 2014. The last reactor compartment is sealed and transported to storage. The Russian nuclear submarine dismantlement program officially ends after 23 years. 167 nuclear submarines have been completely decommissioned. Their reactors contained enough weapons-grade uranium to build over 400 nuclear weapons. All of this material has been safely secured or converted to civilian use. The program prevented the largest potential nuclear proliferation crisis in history. But the legacy remains buried in Arctic storage sites, where 158 reactor compartments wait for permanent disposal in facilities that do not yet exist.